One of my favorite subgenres of horror are slashers. So here's every slasher book that I have read ranked. Out of 9 books, we're going to start with The Angel of Indian Lake by Stephen Graham Jones. I enjoyed this book. I have some serious issues with it. I think Stephen Graham Jones does a lot of stuff great. I think in this one, though, he was trying to do a little too much, and so a lot of the plot points would get set up just to be resolved rather quickly, and I feel like there were too many. Like, there's a big issue, another threat or obstacle or whatever, and there's just another thing just to complete, and then we can keep hopping over new obstacles, so on and so forth. And I just think thematically and what the arc he gave Jay Daniels, the protagonist, was nowhere near as strong as the first two. Still enjoyed it, but honestly, this is one of my most disappointed reads that I've had, and my least favorite slasher that I've read thus far. Number 8, The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones. A very tiny one. I feel like not all of his books, at least the ones I've read, are this small. And just like the Indian Lake trilogy, it's very meta. This is highly stylized, like in one of the most unique books I have read. It's done in a way like you're almost like in the assembly of the editing of a movie, where it's like there's descriptions of like, then we pan to, and like almost like the camera is panning to, and then we cut to, and like the way he does transitions really is kind of like almost like he's editing a film. uh very unique take, high school, classic high school slasher thing of there's a killer. We all thought he was dead. A girl survived, and sort of like taking a horror movie, like classic trope like that, but then going, well, what happens next? And it's almost like this is almost like acting like a sequel, although this is a standalone novel. Uh, where just like, all right, the killer returns, and then the final girl is threatened, but she's actually not the protagonist. You're actually more following some other girls who are at the school. Very interesting. Didn't quite love the killer reveal and how all that played out, and I think it's almost more style over substance because I think it's so focused on this specific writing style that it kind of takes away from the character development in a little bit of the story for me. It was just hard to kind of get immerse myself in because we are so much in the style of the book. Um, Still very cool, very unique, and I think is should be read by slasher fans just because it's so different with its style. Mallrats by Ivy Tholen. Ivy Tholen is a YA slasher writer who is one of my favorites. This is I can't remember if this is her first book or second book. It takes place actually in the same universe as her as Tastes Like Candy, which I do need to read the Tastes Like Candy 2, which came out last year or the year before, something like that. But Mallrats, yeah, this Ginny, she's stuck in this small town of Texas. She stumbles upon a murder at the local mall and kind of gets wrapped up in this slasher frenzy that's happening at the mall. And it's really good. Her books are really brutal for YA. They are gruesome and gory and really, really great characters. I do have issues with the third act. I don't think the killer reveal is satisfying and quietly lines up with everything going on in the story. And then you get the killer motivations and stuff like that. And it was kind of like there was just a lot in the third act too, and it was just kind of like a bit too much, and we could have simplified things, but still enjoyable. And I think an underrated book that I think most people haven't read. So if you're looking for that, uh, overall, very good. Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. I just reviewed this, so you can check that out if you haven't, if you want to get my full thoughts on it. But isolated slasher, people go on vacation, they get an obstacle in the way, they're bused, they go out into the middle of nowhere, then they get stranded and they find a cabin to seek refuge. And the main character, Krista, her husband, or not husband, but boyfriend, gets lost and she gets separated. And then shortly after, people start getting killed and whatnot, and trying to survive in the middle of a snowstorm in a cabin with a killer on the loose. Very cool, very fast paced and thrilling. Uh, Good killer reveal. not the best killer reveal in regarding, and then when it came to the killer motivations and like, the monologue of the killer, I had some issues with, but overall, great characters. Some brutal kills, but not like overly brutal. So if you're a little queasy on gore and stuff like that, it's gonna push you a little bit, but I think you should be good. But overall, this was a very fun slasher that I think is quite mainstream friendly and a little more accessible. A good gateway slasher book, but not the best, but good. There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. I've read one of her other books and really loved it, and came out of this one a little let down because I just loved the other thing I read from her, but this is still a really good YA slasher. Follows Makani Young. She's been left in Nebraska to live with her grandmother after some difficult things happened in her hometown, and she's trying to settle in, get a new life going, and unfortunately, a killer is on the loose and starts killing her fellow students, her peers, and she's trying to survive. And it's typical. Now we have to figure out who the slasher is, while also not get killed ourselves. Very good. It's been a while since I read this one, so I'm a little hazy in some areas, but very good YA slasher. And even if you're not like the biggest fan of YA, I still think it's worth the read. It was a good thrilling ride. All right, guys. Now we're going from like more bottom tier to the more mid tier, but guys, we're in the top tier. These slashers are the ones that everything I'm talking about moving forward, you need to read. Like Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the second book in the Indian Lake trilogy. Jay Daniels comes back to town after the events of the first book. It's about, I think, if I remember correctly, it's like 4 years or something like that afterwards. And right when she gets back to town, a serial killer is loose from a transport gone wrong. And I think the way her character evolved in this is masterfully done. Stephen Graham Jones goes so hard on violence, and there's really interesting reveals and turns in the story. Stephen Graham Jones always takes big swings in his books. I don't think his big swings always work. This is one where he takes a pretty big swing with the story, and I think it really, really works out for it. So, very awesome. But if you know Stephen Graham Jones and you are not good with gore, he is not going to be for you. But if you like gore, this is like one of the best mainstream slasher writers today. 10 by Gretchen McNeil. This is another very underrated read that I think most people haven't read. I just never see it on here or anything like that. One of my favorite slashers of all time. 10 people, high school students, they get invited to a party on an island where, one of the students, the most popular girl in school, has a house there. Everyone comes there. Popular girl is not there. Huh, weird. Well, fuck her. Let's go party anyways. And everyone's having a good time. But not too long after, a body drops. And then more bodies start dropping. And so you're following Meg and Minnie, who are two best friends. And the focus is more on them as they try and survive and figure out who the killer is. Excellent killer reveal. One of my favorite killer reveals in anything I've read. I think my only issue is not great kills. Not very creative. Not very violent. So this actually might be the best gateway slasher because it's really not that violent, especially even compared to Dead of Winter. This is even less violent and gory. So probably actually the best gateway slasher. Very, very excellent. An absolute must read. My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. The first of the Indian Lake trilogy, you get introduced to Jade Daniels, who I think is the best final girl in all of literature, and honestly, I would say rivals even like cinema's final girls. This is an awesome slasher. She's just the girl who cried slasher, she's obsessed with slashers to the point where she actually kind of wants one to come to the town, and when she's saying, hey, there's a slasher, that's why people are dying, and people don't obviously believe her, and she also realizes, the reality of death is not what it's like in movies. Really great. There is a supernatural type element to this trilogy that at first didn't really work for me, but later on very much worked for me. And so, really fun, extremely meta. It will really press you on your horror movie knowledge because some of them deep cuts and interesting references are made in here. Stephen Graham Jones knows a lot about the slasher genre, and it's really impressive and super fun. And man, his violence goes so hard. Number one, Tastes Like Candy by Ivy Tholen. Oh man, this slasher rules. Oh my god, I can't get enough of this book. I think about it all the time. Like such a interesting scenario. This takes place like 30 years after Mallrats. The books aren't connected, they're just set in the same town, and there's like a throwaway line in Mallrats about this scavenger hunt that this book is heavily about, where there's a tradition at the high school. Senior girls invite a group of junior girls to go on a scavenger hunt. Except this year, not at the high school, but at this like Halloween, like horror themed carnival. And these group of girls, they get there and very quickly start getting picked off. And you largely follow Violet, who's the protagonist. You follow some of the other girls too, but Violet is really trying to survive and figure out who the killer is because she has an inkling that the killer has some personal motivations. Kills are super creative, really utilize the setting of this carnival. So carnival games turned into weapons basically against these girls. Kills are gnarly and brutal and gory. The characters are fantastic. I think the pacing of this book is so good. It's small, but it really paces itself really nicely. It's like 60 or 70 pages of not getting to the carnival yet, just establishing characters. But once you get to the carnival, it's a sprint, and it is phenomenal. And I love the killer reveal. I think it rivals 10 for being my favorite killer reveal, but it just really worked for me. This is also YA, but it does not read like YA at all. It's just like, yeah, they're teen girls, but this is some hardcore shit. Super fun. Can't talk about this book enough. I talk about it all the time, and I will forever talk about this book because I love it so deeply, and really need to check out the sequel. Although I am worried, like, please be good. Please, if someone's read the sequel, please tell me if it's good or not. I'm still gonna read it regardless, but you know. What are some of your favorite slashers? Let me know. And you can also check out my content on YouTube and Instagram. I post all these across here and on those places. And you can follow me wherever to keep up with me. Subscribe to my Substack, which is largely about books and writing. You can keep up to date on my upcoming novel, which more news on that later in the year. And you can read my urban fantasy novel, The Huntress and Trickster, which is available now.